Captain Daniel Carter stood on the bridge of the Horizon's Promise, watching the blue and green planet grow larger on the view screen. New Haven Colony waited below, home to 5,000 people who had left Earth 3 years ago to build a new life among the stars. His ship carried food, medicine, and equipment the colonists needed to keep their settlement growing. The communications officer turned to him with a smile. "New Haven is sending their welcome message, Captain. They sound excited about the supplies." Daniel nodded. He had made this trip 6 times before, and each visit showed him how much the colony had grown. They had farms now, schools for the children, and even a small hospital. Commander Lisa Monroe ran the defense garrison that protected the settlement. She was good at her job, keeping the colonists safe while they built their future. The ship moved into orbit, and Daniel prepared to begin unloading cargo. Everything seemed normal. The colony's shields glowed faintly in the sunlight, powered by the fusion reactor the colonists had built. Down below he could see the neat rows of buildings and the green fields spreading across the valley. Then the alarm screamed. Multiple contacts emerging from quantum space. The sensor officer shouted, "Warships, reading as Krillian design." Daniel's blood turned cold. The Krillians were a powerful insect-like species with seats on the Galactic Council. They had argued for years that human expansion threatened their territory, but the Council had always rejected their complaints. Humans had settled only in unclaimed systems, following all the rules. 20 ships appeared on the screen, their dark hulls bristling with weapons. They moved into attack formation without any warning or communication. Daniel grabbed the armrest of his command chair as the first missiles launched toward New Haven. "Get us between them and the colony," he ordered. "Raise shields and charge weapons. Send a distress signal to Earth." His ship was not a warship. The Horizon's Promise carried only basic defensive weapons meant to scare off pirates. Against 20 Krillian military vessels, they had no chance, but Daniel would not abandon the people below without a fight. The colony's shields lit up bright white as the first missiles struck. The barrier held for a few seconds, then began to flicker. More missiles came, wave after wave, hammering at the defenses. On the surface, Daniel could see Commander Monroe's garrison scrambling to battle stations. The shields collapsed in a brilliant flash of light. Immediately, the Krillian ships began firing energy weapons at the buildings below. Explosions bloomed across the settlement as homes and shops were destroyed. The hospital took a direct hit, its walls crumbling into rubble. Daniel fired his small weapons at the nearest Krillian ship, trying to draw their attention away from the helpless colonists. The enemy vessel barely seemed to notice, its thick armor shrugging off the weak blasts. 2 other ships turned toward the Horizon's Promise, and Daniel knew they would destroy his vessel in seconds. Then he saw the landing craft descending from the Krillian ships. Hundreds of armored soldiers poured out, their insect-like bodies, moving with terrible speed through the streets of New Haven. The colonists tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. The garrison fought desperately, but they were outnumbered 10-1. Commander Monroe's voice came over the emergency channel, broken by static and weapon fire. "Captain Carter, you have to evacuate who you can. Get them out of here. We will buy you time." Daniel wanted to argue, to stay and fight, but he knew Monroe was right. His ship might save a few hundred lives if he acted quickly. He gave the order to move into the lower atmosphere, bringing the Horizon's Promise down near the spaceport on the edge of town. Civilians ran toward the ship, carrying children and whatever belongings they could grab. Daniel's crew opened the cargo bays and helped people aboard as fast as possible. He saw a young woman clutching a photograph, tears streaming down her face. She had just watched her family die in the bombardment. That was Sophie Grant, an engineer who had come to New Haven to help build water purification systems. Now she stood in his cargo bay, her whole world destroyed in minutes. Near her, Dr. Nathan Wells tried to treat wounded colonists with the few medical supplies he had grabbed. His hands shook as he worked, his mind still seeing the horrors he had witnessed. The Krillian forces pushed closer to the spaceport. Energy bolts struck the ground around the ship, sending up geysers of dirt and rock. Daniel counted the seconds, trying to get just a few more people aboard before they had to leave. Commander Monroe and her garrison made their last stand at the spaceport entrance, forming a defensive line to protect the evacuating civilians. Daniel watched helplessly as the Krillian soldiers overwhelmed them. Monroe fell, her weapon still firing until the very end. Her entire garrison died, buying time for others to escape. "We have to go now," the pilot shouted. "Their warships are targeting us." Daniel gave the order to launch, his heart breaking as he left hundreds more people behind. The Horizon's Promise lifted off under heavy fire, her shields flashing as energy bolts hammered against them. More Krillian ships moved to intercept, but Daniel's pilot was skilled. The ship dodged and weaved, racing toward the safety of space. As they climbed away from the planet, Daniel looked back at New Haven one last time. Fires burned across the entire settlement. The Krillian ships continued their attack, leaving nothing but destruction behind. 5,000 people had lived there that morning. Now only the 300 survivors on his ship remained. The communications officer looked up with horror on her face. "Captain, we are receiving distress calls from other colonies. The same thing is happening across 7 different systems." Daniel felt sick. This was not a random attack. The Krillians had planned this, launching coordinated strikes against multiple human settlements at the same time. They were trying to wipe out human expansion in a single brutal operation. The ship jumped into hyperspace, leaving the massacre behind. In the cargo bay, Sophie Grant sat among the other survivors, holding her photograph and crying silently. Dr. Wells moved from patient to patient, trying to save lives while haunted by the images of Krillian soldiers executing wounded people in the streets. These survivors would carry those memories forever. 3 days later, the Horizon's Promise arrived at Earth. Daniel delivered his report to Fleet Admiral Victoria Hughes at Central Command. She listened in silence as he described the attack, watched the recordings his ship had captured, and read the statements from survivors. When he finished, Admiral Hughes was quiet for a long moment. Then she called an emergency meeting with President Alexander Ross and the entire military leadership. Daniel knew what was coming. Humanity had tried to follow the rules, to be good members of the Galactic Council, but the Council's rules had not protected New Haven or the other colonies. Now humanity would have to protect itself, no matter what the Council thought. The Krillians had started something they did not understand. They had attacked a species that had survived countless wars on their own world, a species that had climbed from caves to the stars through determination and strength. The Krillians would learn that humans did not forgive those who slaughtered their children. As Daniel left the meeting room, he passed Sophie Grant in the hallway. She was staring out a window at Earth below, her eyes hollow and empty. He stopped beside her, not knowing what to say. Finally, she spoke without looking at him. "They will pay for this, won't they, Captain? Someone will make them pay." Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder. "Yes, they will pay. I promise you that." He meant every word. Humanity was about to show the galaxy what happened when you attacked their innocent people. The Krillians thought they were dealing with a weak species that would accept this massacre. They were wrong. They were very, very wrong. Ambassador Margaret Sullivan walked through the enormous doors of the Galactic Council chamber on Concordia Prime Station. The hall was vast, with seats rising in circles around a central platform where speakers addressed the assembled delegates. Representatives from dozens of species filled those seats, their varied forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes. Margaret carried a data tablet containing evidence of the Krillian attacks. Images of burning colonies, testimonies from survivors, intercepted communications proving the assault was ordered by Krillian High Command. 15,000 human civilians had died in 7 different systems. The evidence was clear and undeniable. She took her position at the speaking platform and waited for silence. Elder Crone, chairman of the council and a member of the ancient Lidarian race, nodded for her to begin. His species had been traveling the stars when humans still lived in caves. He looked at her with the patient expression of someone who had seen 1,000 crises come and go. "Honored members of the council," Margaret began, her voice steady despite her anger. "I stand before you today to present evidence of a crime against humanity. The Krillian Empire has attacked 7 human colonies without warning or provocation. They have killed 15,000 innocent civilians, including women and children." She activated the holographic display above the platform. Images appeared showing the peaceful colony of New Haven before the attack. Then came footage of the Krillian warships emerging from quantum space, the bombardment, the slaughter. Gasps echoed through the chamber as delegates watched civilians being gunned down in the streets. Margaret showed the intercepted communications next. Krillian military orders directing ships to multiple human systems. Instructions to leave no survivors. Plans that had been made weeks before the attacks. This was not a defensive action or a mistake. This was planned genocide. When she finished her presentation, the chamber erupted into heated discussion. Delegates argued with each other in dozens of languages. Some looked horrified by what they had seen. Others remained stone-faced, their expressions revealing nothing. Then High Commander Zekthor rose from his seat in the Krillian section. His insect-like body was covered in ceremonial armor, and his voice buzzed with confidence as he addressed the council. The human ambassador shows you only part of the story. Our forces acted in self-defense against human military installations that threatened Krillian territory. He activated his own display, showing what he claimed were intelligence reports. According to Zekthor, humans had been building secret military bases near Krillian space, preparing for aggressive expansion. The colonies were not peaceful settlements but staging grounds for invasion. Margaret wanted to scream that he was lying. The reports were obviously fake, created after the attacks to justify the massacre. But Zekthor presented them with such confidence that some delegates began nodding along. She watched in growing horror as the Krillian lies took root. The ambassador from the Saurian collective spoke next, his reptilian features expressionless. The Krillian Empire has been a valued member of this council for 3,000 years. Humanity has been part of our community for less than 50. We must carefully consider all evidence before making accusations against such an established member. Another voice joined in, this one from the crystalline Vex Concordance. Humanity is known for its aggressive tendencies. Perhaps the Krillians were indeed defending themselves from a threat. We should investigate thoroughly before placing blame. Margaret saw what was happening. The Krillians had spent months building support, bribing and threatening smaller council members. They had created a coalition that would protect them no matter what crimes they committed. The fix was in before she even entered the chamber. Not all delegates supported the Krillians. Ambassador Trill of the Virians, a gentle insectoid species, spoke with clear sympathy. I have reviewed the evidence the human ambassador provides. It appears quite compelling. We should at minimum condemn the attacks on civilian populations and demand reparations. Several other smaller species agreed, but their voices were drowned out by the established powers. Elder Crone called for a vote on whether to condemn the Krillian actions. Margaret held her breath as the results appeared on the main display. The motion failed. Instead, the council passed a resolution calling for an investigation that could take years to complete. In the meantime, no sanctions would be placed on the Krillian Empire. High Commander Zekthor would face no consequences for ordering the death of 15,000 people. Elder Crone addressed the chamber with the same patient tone he always used. The council understands the human grief over this tragedy. However, we must prioritize stability among all member species. We cannot rush to judgment based on incomplete information. The investigation will reveal the truth in time. Margaret felt rage burning in her chest. Stability meant protecting powerful species like the Krillians, at the expense of newcomers like humanity. The Council's rules were designed by ancient civilizations to maintain their dominance. Justice for the victims of New Haven meant nothing compared to political convenience. After the session ended, several sympathetic ambassadors approached her privately. Ambassador Trill looked distressed as she spoke quietly. I am so sorry for your people's loss. I voted to condemn the attacks, but my voice carries little weight. The elder species control the council, and they protect each other above all else. Another delegate, a representative from a species Margaret barely recognized, whispered urgently. You should know that the Krillians have been planning this for months. They offered my government trade deals in exchange for our support. Others received threats. The council is more corrupt than you realize. That evening, Margaret met with Captain Daniel Carter in a secure room deep within the human embassy. He had been gathering intelligence on council politics while she presented their case. What he had learned was disturbing. The Krillians have been working on this for over a year, Daniel explained, showing her documents on his datapad. They want to expand their territory but knew the Council would object if they attacked an established species, so they chose us. Newer members with fewer allies and less political power. Margaret studied the evidence with growing anger. The attack on human colonies was a test. The Krillians wanted to see if the Council would let them get away with genocide. If they succeeded, other powerful species would know they could do the same to any smaller civilization that stood in their way. She composed a message to President Alexander Ross and Admiral Victoria Hughes. Her words were carefully chosen, but their meaning was clear. The Galactic Council would not protect humanity. The system was rigged to favor ancient species over newcomers. If humans wanted justice and security, they would have to take action themselves. 3 days later, Margaret received a response. President Ross had made his decision. He was authorizing Admiral Hughes to prepare a military response to the Krillian attacks. The operation would be swift and decisive, targeting Krillian military installations while avoiding civilian casualties. Humanity would show the galaxy that attacking humans carried serious consequences. Margaret read the message twice, then deleted it from her system. She looked out the window at the enormous space station around her. Concordia Prime was supposed to be a place where all species found justice and protection. Instead, it was a monument to corruption and political games. Captain Carter joined her at the window. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we show them what humanity is capable of," Margaret replied. "The Council thinks we are weak because we are new to the stars. They think we will accept this injustice because we lack the power to fight back. They are about to learn how wrong they are." She thought of Sophie Grant and the other survivors, people who had lost everything because the Council failed to protect them. She thought of Commander Lisa Monroe and her garrison, soldiers who died defending innocent civilians while the Krillians committed murder without fear of punishment. The Council had made its choice. Elder Crone and his supporters valued stability over justice, political convenience over moral duty. They had abandoned humanity to the mercy of predators. Now humanity would remind the galaxy of an important truth. Humans did not need the Council's permission to defend themselves. Deep beneath the Swiss Alps on Earth, military leaders gathered in a secure bunker. Admiral Hughes stood before holographic displays showing Krillian military positions. She explained her plan to the assembled officers, detailing targets and strategies. The operation had a name that captured its purpose perfectly. They called it Righteous Fury. Soon the Krillians would understand why you should never attack humanity's children. Soon the entire galaxy would know that humans were not prey to be hunted. They were predators who had climbed to the top of the food chain on their own world, and they would do the same among the stars. President Alexander Ross stood before cameras broadcasting to every human settlement across the galaxy. His face showed the weight of what he was about to say, but his voice remained strong and clear. Behind him, the flags of Earth and its colonies hung in silent witness. "My fellow humans," he began. 2 weeks ago, the Krillian Empire attacked 7 of our colonies without warning. They killed 15,000 innocent people, including children who had their whole lives ahead of them. We brought evidence of this crime to the Galactic Council, hoping for justice. Instead, we found corruption and cowardice. Ross paused, letting his words sink in across billions of viewers. The Council refused to hold the Krillians accountable. They chose political stability over moral duty. They abandoned our people because we are newcomers without powerful allies. Today I declare that humanity will no longer rely on a system that does not protect us. The response was immediate. Within hours, military recruitment centers were flooded with volunteers. Young people who had planned to become farmers or engineers or teachers signed up to defend humanity. Parents who had lost children at New Haven demanded the chance to serve. The entire species united behind a single purpose: Admiral Victoria. Hughes watched the mobilization from her command center beneath the Swiss Alps. Every shipyard from Earth to the outer colonies worked without stopping. Ships that carried cargo were modified to carry weapons. Mining vessels became troop transports. The industrial might of humanity, built over centuries, turned toward war. Commander Linda Parks coordinated the conversion of civilian ships. She had been a logistics officer before the attacks, managing supply routes and cargo schedules. Now she organized the transformation of hundreds of vessels into a support fleet that could keep the military supplied across multiple systems. General Marcus Kane assembled ground forces for potential planetary operations. His training facilities ran day and night, preparing soldiers for combat in alien environments. Kane knew that space battles might not be enough. If humanity needed to occupy Krillian territory, his troops would be ready. The scale of the effort was enormous, but humans had done this before. Their species had survived ice ages and plagues, world wars, and nuclear threats. They had climbed from caves to the stars through determination and intelligence. Now they would show the galaxy what happened when you pushed humanity too far. Dr. Helen Price stood in a secret research facility, revealing weapons her team had developed over decades. The Galactic Council believed human technology was primitive compared to theirs. They were wrong. Humans had simply been careful about what they showed to potential rivals. She demonstrated quantum disruption missiles that could bypass any shield technology currently used by Council species. The missiles created tiny tears in spacetime, allowing warheads to pass through defensive barriers as if they were not there. Every Krillian fortress would be vulnerable. Next came electromagnetic pulse weapons designed specifically for Krillian biotechnology. The insectoid species integrated organic components into their systems, making them more adaptable but also more vulnerable to certain attacks. A single EMP burst could disable an entire Krillian warship. Most impressive were the stealth systems. Human ships could become almost invisible to galactic sensors by using technology adapted from submarine warfare. The Krillians would not see the attack coming until weapons were already firing at them. Speed and surprise would give humanity the advantage. Captain Daniel Carter received orders to report to the orbital shipyards above Earth. When he arrived, he found a vessel unlike anything he had commanded before. The Earth's Vengeance was a dreadnought-class warship, over 1 kilometer long and bristling with the latest weapons. She was built for one purpose: to strike fear into humanity's enemies. His crew included familiar faces. Sophie Grant came aboard as systems engineer, the same young woman who had lost her family at New Haven. She threw herself into her work with fierce dedication, making sure every system on the ship worked perfectly. Her grief had transformed into determination. Dr. Nathan Wells joined as chief medical officer. The gentle doctor who had treated wounded colonists now prepared to care for soldiers going into battle. His hands no longer shook. The horror he had witnessed at New Haven had changed him, hardening his resolve to protect those who protected others. Lieutenant Chris Morgan took the tactical station. He was a veteran of border skirmishes with pirates, known for his ability to outthink opponents. Morgan studied Krillian combat doctrine, finding weaknesses in their traditional strategies. The Krillians relied on overwhelming force, but humans had learned to fight smarter rather than harder. Lieutenant Kelly Barnes managed communications and electronic warfare. She could hack into enemy systems and feed them false information while protecting human networks from infiltration. In modern space combat, information was as important as weapons. Kelly would make sure the Krillians fought blind while humanity saw everything. Commander Patricia Jordan briefed the Fleet Command on the strategic plan. Her intelligence network had mapped every major Krillian military installation. She identified 3 key systems that, if struck simultaneously, would cripple their ability to threaten human space or attack other vulnerable species. The first target was the military fortress orbiting Krill Prime, their homeworld. The fortress controlled the defense of their most important planet and served as the command center for their entire fleet. Destroying it would eliminate their ability to coordinate large-scale operations. The second target was Zek's Station, their primary shipyard. Every Krillian warship was built there, including the vessels that attacked New Haven. Eliminating the yards would prevent them from replacing their losses. Without new ships, they could not threaten anyone. The third target was the military academy on Thorax III. Generations of Krillian officers had learned their aggressive tactics there, studying how to conquer and dominate other species. Taking the academy would disrupt their ability to train future commanders, while also capturing valuable intelligence about their strategies. Jordan emphasized one critical rule: civilian targets were absolutely forbidden. Humanity was not seeking genocide or revenge. They wanted justice and security. Every weapon would be aimed only at military installations. Any officer who violated this order would face court-martial. This was the difference between humanity and the Krillians. The Krillians had murdered children and destroyed homes. Humans would strike military targets with precision, showing the galaxy that strength did not require cruelty. The moral high ground mattered even in war. 3 weeks after the Council's betrayal, Admiral Hughes stood before the assembled fleet. Nearly 200 warships floated in formation at the edge of human space. They included everything from small, fast destroyers to massive carriers holding squadrons of fighters. It was the largest military force humanity had ever assembled. She broadcast a message to every ship. Today we strike back against those who attacked our innocent people. We do not fight for conquest or revenge. We fight for justice and for the safety of all peaceful species the Council has failed to protect. Show them what humanity is capable of. Show them why they should have chosen differently. Captain Carter stood on the bridge of the Earth's Vengeance, surrounded by his crew. Sophie Grant monitored the ship's systems, ready to maximize every advantage their technology provided. Dr. Wells prepared the medical bay for casualties. Lieutenant Morgan calculated firing solutions. Lieutenant Barnes encrypted their communications. Daniel thought of Commander Lisa Monroe and her garrison, who had given their lives protecting civilians at New Haven. He thought of the children who would never grow up, the families torn apart, the dreams destroyed. This was for them. This was to make sure no other species suffered what humanity had suffered. He addressed his crew one final time. We are not monsters like those who attacked our colonies. We are defenders. We are the protectors of the innocent. Every shot we fire will be aimed at those who chose violence. We will show the galaxy the difference between justice and murder. Admiral Hughes gave the final order. Operation Righteous Fury was now active. The fleet engaged their quantum drives and vanished from human space. They would emerge in Krillian territory within the hour. The Krillians had started this war thinking humans were weak. They were about to learn the truth about the species that had fought its way from caves to the stars. The age of humanity accepting injustice was over. The Galactic Council had made its choice. Now humanity would make theirs, and the entire galaxy would remember what happened when you attacked human children. The human fleet emerged from quantum space in 3 separate locations across Krillian territory. Their appearance was nearly simultaneous, timed to within seconds of each other. The Krillians had no warning, no time to prepare. One moment their space was empty. The next moment it was filled with human warships. High Commander Zekthor was in his command station orbiting Krill Prime when the alarms began screaming. His fortress was supposed to be the most secure location in the Empire, protected by shields that could withstand anything. He stared at the tactical display in disbelief, as dozens of human ships appeared around his position. Their sensors barely detected the humans, until they were already in weapons range. The stealth technology made human ships appear like ghosts, visible one moment and invisible the next. Zekthor screamed orders at his officers, demanding they raise shields and return fire. But it was already too late. Captain Daniel Carter commanded the Earth's Vengeance at the head of the assault fleet. He targeted the fortress with quantum disruption missiles, weapons the Krillians had never encountered. The missiles created tiny tears in space-time, passing through the fortress shields as if they were not there. Explosions bloomed across the fortress surface as the warheads found their targets. Power stations, weapon batteries, communication arrays. Each missile hit exactly where it was supposed to. Precision that came from months of intelligence gathering. Sophie Grant monitored the targeting systems from her engineering station, ensuring every shot counted. Lieutenant Chris Morgan coordinated the attack pattern, analyzing Krillian defensive responses and adjusting tactics in real time. The Krillians tried to adapt, but their strategies were designed for fighting Council species who followed predictable patterns. Human tactics were different, unpredictable, evolved from centuries of warfare on Earth. Within the first hour, the fortress shields collapsed completely. Supporting ships commanded by Captain Ryan Foster and Captain Laura Bennett moved in to disable the remaining defense platforms. They avoided hitting any structures that might harm civilians on the planet below. Every shot was carefully aimed at military targets only. Zekthor watched his fortress crumble around him. The humans were destroying everything his species had built to protect their homeworld. He had thought humans were weak, barely worthy of notice. He had been so wrong. The species that had climbed from primitive caves to master space travel was showing him what real strength looked like. In the second system, Admiral Victoria Hughes personally commanded the strike on Zek's station. The massive shipyards floated in orbit around a gas giant, protected by defensive satellites and patrol ships. Commander Patricia Jordan's intelligence had been perfect. Every defensive position was exactly where her report said it would be. Hughes launched electromagnetic pulse weapons at the defending ships. The Krillian vessels relied on bio-integrated technology, organic components woven into their systems. The EMP pulses overloaded those organic parts, shutting down entire ships without destroying them. Krillian crews found themselves floating helpless as human forces swept past. The shipyards themselves were enormous, capable of constructing dreadnoughts and carriers. 3 partially built warships sat in the construction bays, each one intended to terrorize human colonies. Hughes gave the order to destroy them all. Missiles tore through the incomplete vessels, sending debris spinning into the gas giant below. Human Marines boarded the station, securing key sections and capturing Krillian military personnel for future war crimes trials. The prisoners would testify about who ordered the attacks on human colonies, providing evidence that would eventually be used to hold leaders accountable. Justice would be served properly, not through revenge. In the third system, General Marcus Kane led the assault on the military academy at Thorax III. His carrier group emerged in orbit around the planet, launching fighters to establish air superiority. The academy below was a sprawling complex where Krillian officers learned aggressive expansion tactics. Kane's ground forces descended in armored dropships, using Dr. Helen Price's non-lethal suppression weapons wherever possible. The goal was to capture the facility intact and protect the young cadets who had played no part in the massacre decision. Humans fought with precision, taking control of buildings one by one. The Krillian defenders fought hard, but they were not prepared for human urban combat tactics. Kane's soldiers moved through the buildings like water, flowing around strong points and overwhelming weak ones. Within hours, the academy commandant surrendered to avoid further casualties among his students. Throughout all 3 operations, humanity broadcast its message on every frequency. Lieutenant Kelly Barnes coordinated the transmissions from the Earth's vengeance. The broadcasts included footage of the New Haven massacre alongside proof of the Council's betrayal. Every species in the galaxy could see exactly why humanity was taking action. The message was clear and simple. Humanity sought justice, not conquest. They defended themselves and would protect any peaceful species facing similar aggression. The Galactic Council had failed in its duty, so humanity would act alone. This was what happened when you attacked human civilians and thought there would be no consequences. On Krill Prime, Zekthor attempted to flee his crumbling fortress in an escape pod. Captain Foster's ship detected the launch and intercepted it before it could reach the planet. Marines brought the High Commander aboard in restraints. He would face trial for ordering the deaths of 15,000 people. Dr. Nathan Wells treated wounded Krillian soldiers in the medical bay of the Earth's vengeance. Even though these were enemy combatants, his oath as a doctor required him to provide care. He worked alongside captured Krillian medical staff, showing them that humans did not torture or abuse prisoners. Honor mattered even in war. Sophie Grant monitored damage reports from all 3 battle zones. The human fleet had achieved every objective with minimal casualties. Krillian military capacity was reduced by approximately 60%. Their fortress was destroyed, their shipyards were rubble, and their academy was occupied. Most importantly, civilian casualties were almost zero. This was the difference between human justice and Krillian brutality. The Krillians had murdered children in their homes. Humans had struck military targets with surgical precision. Every missile had been aimed carefully. Every soldier had followed strict rules of engagement. Strength without cruelty, power with honor. 8 hours after the operation began, Admiral Hughes gave the order to withdraw. All objectives had been accomplished. The human fleet regrouped at designated coordinates, counted their losses, and prepared to return home. They had proven their point. The Krillian Empire would not threaten human colonies again. Captain Carter stood on his bridge as the Earth's vengeance prepared to jump back to human space. He looked at the planet below, at the Krillian homeworld that had spawned the leaders who ordered genocide. He felt no satisfaction in the destruction they had caused. War was terrible even when necessary, but he remembered New Haven burning. He remembered Sophie Grant's tears as she clutched a photograph of her dead family. He remembered Commander Monroe and her garrison dying to protect civilians. Sometimes terrible things had to be done to prevent even worse outcomes. Sometimes justice required strength. The fleet jumped to quantum space, leaving the Krillian systems behind. News of the attack spread across the galaxy at the speed of light. Every species with access to the Galactic Communication Network learned what happened. The humans, dismissed as newcomers without power, had struck the Krillian Empire with devastating efficiency. On Concordia Prime, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Elder Crone called the delegates together with urgency that had been missing when human colonies burned. Ambassador Margaret Sullivan received notice to appear before the Council immediately. The power dynamic had shifted overnight. The species that had supported the Krillians now scrambled to distance themselves. The ones that had remained silent suddenly found their voices, and the smaller vulnerable species looked at humanity with new eyes. Here was a power that would defend the innocent, that would stand up to bullies, that valued justice over political convenience. The age of humanity being dismissed as insignificant was over. The Krillians had learned that attacking human civilians carried a terrible price, and the Galactic Council was about to discover that they could no longer ignore or manipulate Earth. A new force had emerged in galactic politics, one that fought for what was right rather than what was convenient. Fear was spreading through the council chambers. Not fear of human aggression or conquest, fear that their corrupt system would be exposed. Fear that other species would follow humanity's example. Fear that justice might actually matter more than ancient political alliances. The galaxy was changing and nothing would ever be the same. The Galactic Council chamber on Concordia Prime erupted into chaos. Delegates shouted across the circular hall, their voices overlapping in dozens of languages. Reports continued flooding in from Krillian space, each one more shocking than the last. The fortress destroyed. The shipyards reduced to debris. The Academy captured. Ambassador Margaret Sullivan sat in the human section, watching the panic spread through the assembled species. 2 weeks ago, these same delegates had refused to condemn the Krillian attacks. They had dismissed human concerns as unimportant. Now they scrambled to understand how the species they had ignored had struck with such devastating precision. Elder Crone pounded his gavel, demanding order. The ancient Lidarian's face showed worry for the first time in Sullivan's memory. Security forces patrol the station at maximum alert, he announced. We cannot allow the violence to spread here. The council must remain a place of peace and discussion. But everyone in the chamber understood what that meant. Elder Crone was afraid. The council station had always been safe because no one dared attack it. Now humanity had proven they could strike anywhere they chose. If they wanted to, human ships could appear around Concordia Prime just as easily as they had appeared around Krill Prime. Military analysts from multiple species presented their findings to the council. The reports painted a disturbing picture for those who had assumed human technology was primitive. Human stealth systems exceeded anything currently available to council species. Their weapons bypassed standard defensive shields. Their tactical coordination demonstrated centuries of warfare experience. Most concerning was human industrial capacity. Earth alone could replace its military losses faster than most council members could produce their entire fleets. The colonies added even more production. If humanity chose to, they could build an armada that would dwarf any single species' forces. They had the resources, the technology, and now they had proven they had the will. The Saurian Collective ambassador rose to speak, his reptilian features carefully neutral. We were obviously misinformed about the nature of the Krillian operations. The Saurian government wishes to make clear that we do not support attacks on civilian populations. We extend our sympathies to the human people for their losses. Sullivan wanted to laugh at the transparent reversal. 2 weeks ago, the Saurians had defended the Krillians. Now they practically fell over themselves to distance from the losing side. The Vex Concordance ambassador made a similar statement, claiming they had been deceived about the true nature of the colony attacks. Several smaller species approached Sullivan privately during breaks in the session. They offered intelligence about other council corruption, hoping to curry favor with humanity. Some requested defensive pacts, afraid they might be the next target of an aggressive neighbor. Ambassador Trill of the Virians formally proposed a new alliance of younger species seeking reform. When Sullivan's turn came to address the council, she walked to the speaking platform with calm confidence. The chamber fell silent as delegates waited to hear what humanity would say. She looked around at the assembled species, making eye contact with those who had betrayed her trust. Members of the Galactic Council, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space. 2 weeks ago, I stood here and presented evidence of genocide against my people. I asked for justice. You refused. You chose to protect the guilty because they were powerful and we were newcomers. Sullivan paused, letting her words sink in. Today you call emergency sessions because humanity defended itself. You demand we explain our actions. But where was this urgency when our children were being murdered? Where was this concern when Krillian ships bombarded our colonies? She activated a holographic display showing footage from the human operations. Every missile hitting military targets. Every effort to avoid civilian casualties. The precision and care humanity had taken even in the midst of justified retaliation. This is how we fight. We struck those who attacked us, but we did not become them. We sought justice, not revenge. Humanity came to the stars hoping to join a community of peaceful species, Sullivan continued. We followed your rules. We settled only unclaimed systems. We brought our grievances to this council as required, and when we were attacked, you abandoned us. You chose political stability over moral duty. Her voice grew harder, more determined. Today I announce that humanity will no longer automatically defer to council authority. We will judge each situation on its merits. If the council acts justly, we will support it. If the council fails in its duties, we will act independently. Our protection is offered to any species facing aggression you refuse to address. The chamber erupted in arguments again. Elder Crone attempted to impose sanctions on humanity for acting without council approval. But when the vote was called, half the council refused to support it. Too many species recognized that humanity had done what the council should have done. Others simply feared making an enemy of this newly revealed power. Within days, several species announced they were opening embassies on Earth. They recognized humanity as a major galactic power and sought formal diplomatic relations. The Krillian Empire, their military shattered and their economy in ruins, sued for peace. They agreed to pay reparations for the massacred colonists and submitted to human demands for justice. High Commander Zekthor faced trial at a special tribunal assembled by neutral species. Dr. Nathan Wells provided testimony about the atrocities he had witnessed at New Haven. Sophie Grant spoke about watching her family die in the bombardment. Captain Daniel Carter presented evidence of the coordinated attacks across 7 systems. The tribunal found Zekthor guilty of war crimes and crimes against sentient beings. He was sentenced to life imprisonment, his military rank stripped away. Other Krillian officers who had participated in planning the attacks faced similar consequences. Justice, delayed by the council's cowardice, was finally served. Back on Earth, a memorial ceremony was held for the victims of New Haven and the other destroyed colonies. President Alexander Ross spoke about the 15,000 people who had dreamed of building new lives among the stars. Their names were read aloud, each one remembered, each one honored. Captain Carter and the crew of the Earth's Vengeance attended the ceremony. Sophie Grant placed flowers at the memorial wall, her hand touching the names of her parents and younger brother. Dr. Wells stood silently, remembering the patients he could not save. Lieutenant Morgan and Lieutenant Barnes saluted the fallen, knowing their sacrifice had not been in vain. President Ross announced the establishment of the Frontier Defense Initiative. Humanity would dedicate resources to protecting all human colonies with rapid response fleets. They would also offer assistance to vulnerable species facing aggression. No one would suffer what New Haven suffered if humanity could prevent it. Admiral Victoria Hughes oversaw the formation of these defense fleets, ships stationed at strategic locations across human space, ready to respond to threats within hours instead of days. The technology that had won the war against the Krillians would now protect the innocent. Strength existed to defend, not to conquer. Commander Patricia Jordan established an expanded intelligence network to monitor potential threats. She recruited agents from multiple species, building connections with those who valued justice over political games. Information flowed into human command centers, ensuring they would never again be caught unprepared. Dr. Helen Price and her research team continued developing new technologies, but now with an eye toward defense rather than offense. Shield systems to protect colonies, early warning sensors to detect approaching threats, medical advances to save lives rather than take them. Human ingenuity would build rather than destroy. 6 months after Operation Righteous Fury, Ambassador Sullivan reported that the galactic political landscape had fundamentally changed. Smaller species no longer felt powerless against aggressive neighbors. The Council could no longer ignore injustice without consequences. Reform movements gained strength across dozens of worlds. Elder Crone and the other ancient species still controlled the council, but their authority was diminished. They had to consider how their decisions would be perceived by younger, more aggressive species like humanity. The comfortable corruption of centuries could not survive in this new environment. Change was coming, slowly but inevitably. Captain Carter received command of a new assignment. The Earth's vengeance would lead the first frontier fleet, protecting human colonies and responding to requests for assistance from allied species. His crew remained with him, having proven themselves in the crucible of combat. Together they would ensure peace through strength. Sophie Grant worked in the ship's engineering section, maintaining the systems that kept them all safe. She still carried her family's photograph, but now she also carried hope. Hope that her work would prevent other families from suffering what hers had suffered. Hope that humanity's strength would protect the innocent. Dr. Wells treated patients in the medical bay, both human and alien. He had seen the worst that sentient beings could do to each other at New Haven. Now he worked to heal and preserve life wherever he found it. His hands were steady again, guided by purpose and hope for a better future. The galaxy had learned an important lesson.